If the United States Air Force did recover alien bodies, they didn't tell me about it either, and I want to know.
Is it possible for the military to keep secrets about UFOs from the president?
There's always things like that going on. Flying saucers, and they've had other things, you know.
What does the Commander-in-Chief really know about extraterrestrials?
We were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
How many times has the United States defended itself from UFOs? Since World War II, every chief executive has tackled the national security threat posed by unidentified flying objects. Discover the evidence behind these presidential predicaments as we open the UFO files on UFOs and the White House. July 1947. New threats of war and a new enemy, the Soviet Union.
That false philosophy is communism.
Has Americans looking to the sky. President Harry S. Truman is informed of a possible incident in New Mexico.
Truman was the man on the spot when this stuff hit big time. Truman is an absolute critical key in looking at the entire UFO phenomenon in the early years. We know that these presidents were being briefed orally, if nothing else, on the topic of flying saucers. We know it from the man who gave Truman his briefings, and that was General Robert Landry, who was a colonel at the time in the Air Force.
President Truman rewarded Landry, his personal pilot, for his exemplary service by appointing him as his Air Force aide on UFOs to consult with the CIA on the subject.
And that he was told to report to the president orally and brief him orally every 3 months on the subject in UFOs, which he said he did up until the president left office. It's done orally. We don't want records. If you don't want it on the front page of the New York Times, don't put it in a file, that kind of idea.
But an incident said to have occurred in the nation's capital was impossible to ignore.
1952 is just, again, one of these very significant years in UFO history. A massive wave of very high-quality sightings by military and civilians all across the U.S., culminating in successive weekends in July of 1952 of UFOs over the Capitol. It was such a big thing that the press made it the front page. It was the front page of the New York Times.
Truman took the subject head-on.
So there was less hesitation on the part of public leaders to talk about flying saucers.
We shall never try to placate an aggressor by the false and wicked bargain of trading honor for security.
While Truman addressed the subject publicly, he was never said to have a close encounter himself. However, Dwight Eisenhower, according to ufologists, experienced a sighting in the early 1950s.
And the story was that he was off the British coast, 1952, and that this object, a bluish type object, appeared off the side of the ship. I think it occurred for about 10 minutes. Eisenhower and the admiral on the ship had come out onto the deck, and Eisenhower was in PJs. He stood there and watched this thing, and that Eisenhower basically said, well, I better go look into this. I wouldn't mention it right now, and went in, and the fellow who reported it said he never heard anything more about it again.
During Eisenhower's term, UFOs became part of America's pop culture through movies and TV shows. But the White House may have had more than a movie script to read.
Eisenhower was on the job when UFO secrecy really started to formulate in a systematic way. It was under Eisenhower's administration that even within the military, the UFO topic was becoming much more restricted.
In 1963, President John F. Kennedy was boating near his Hyannisport home.
So there's a reported, alleged sighting that he was sailing off Cape Cod, that an object silver object, whatever it was, 60 feet across, something like that, came down, and everybody saw the object, and Kennedy basically said, let's not tell anybody about this.
Records show that Robert F. Kennedy, JFK's brother and the Attorney General, did share letters from UFO researchers with Congressman Gerald Ford and Air Force officials.
Robert Kennedy was very interested in UFOs. There's a number of letters that have surfaced where he dealt with UFOs.
Many UFO researchers believe that political differences may affect access to certain information, and that some U.S. presidents have not been fully briefed about UFOs by the intelligence community. The same researchers suggest JFK may have been the first president to be kept from the whole truth. Lyndon Baines Johnson first served in the White House as President John Kennedy's vice president. During LBJ's term, military officials were said to have investigated an alleged UFO crash near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. The events of Thursday, December 9, 1965 remain an important chapter in the history of UFOs and the White House.
There was a recovery team. NASA was identified as being there. Air Force was identified as being there. The object was moved away, and end of story. They said it was a meteorite. That was the official explanation.
President Richard Milhous Nixon's interest in UFOs is harder to calculate. Many UFO researchers believe Nixon received specific briefings, information he may have wanted to take public.
There's some very good indications that he planned to reveal data, that UFOs Past, Present, and Future, a book by Robert Emenegger, a television program that was done with that title. I talked to Emenegger, and he got asked by the Republican Party to produce that show using only government people, because the idea was they were going to release data.
Congress should investigate the rash of reported sightings of unidentified flying objects in southern Michigan and other parts of the country.
Gerald R. Ford had shown interest in the UFO subject as a congressman due to sightings by people in his district during the 1960s.
What a lot of people don't realize is that the primary function of a congressman is to serve his constituents. So Jerry, out of service to his constituents, saw to it that there would be a hearing.
On April 5, 1966, the House Armed Services Committee held public hearings on the subject of unidentified flying objects. It's unknown whether the hearings actually had an impact on Ford's view of UFOs after becoming president, but many researchers maintain Ford selected advisors who showed an understanding of the potential threat posed by UFOs.
He had some advisors who, at the time, may not have been all that important. There was Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. Had George Bush Sr. as his CIA director. Had some people who he could trust and who could trust him.
After leaving the White House, Ford replied to a letter from a former Air Force intelligence officer who researched UFOs. During my public career in Congress as Vice President and President, I made various requests for information on UFOs. The official authorities always denied the UFO allegations.
As President, Ford said nothing on this topic. So you can either think someone got to him or he just lost interest, but I think more likely he decided it wasn't politically prudent to discuss this matter.
While there are some documents connecting UFOs in the White House and a few reports that presidents may have seen them, there's only one public admission. President Jimmy Carter was the first commander-in-chief to admit to seeing a UFO.
Carter was known as UFO president because he actually talked about his sighting. A UFO group had contacted him, wrote him a letter and said, could you fill out our sighting report?